Hi there. Well, I just thought, since you went off to sleep last time a little early, that I would read a book out to you and maybe you'll read it at a time you're choosing. Maybe when you remember me or remember someone else. And I hope my voice will give you a little bit of comfort, right? Now, this is a book we started off reading but never got around to finishing it. It's a book called Ramayana. Naturally, it's a very old book, but and there are many versions of it. And I hope the story makes you interested and want to know more about it. Right? So the Ramayana, as I said, has many versions of it written by many people over the years. And this one is written by Arisha Sattar and it's illustrated by Sonali Zohra. Now, Arisha seems to have got a PhD in Indian classical literature from University of Chicago. She went to Chicago to get her uh, PhD, and she's been writing a lot of books on Ramayana and adventures of Hanuman. So obviously she knows her stuff. And the illustrator is Sonali Zohra, who has studied fine art and photography and applies principle of both to her work. Photographs and so you see some pretty nifty designs and paintings. So let's see. Starts off the first part in Ayodhya. Yeah, that's where it begins. Ayodhya. Once, long ago, there lived a king named Dashrath. He ruled a peaceful and prosperous kingdom bordered by rivers and forests. His capital city, Ayodhya, was rich and splendid. It lay amidst fields of green. Its buildings were tall and white, its streets were wide and clean, its people happy and healthy. Everything was as it should be. The rains were gentle and came on time. The crops were sown and harvested. Food was plentiful, and there was neither sickness nor poverty among the people. Priests performed the sacred rituals, soldiers guarded the land and protected the weak, farmers tilled and sowed, and while cobblers made shoes and goat herds tended their flocks, jewelers created beautiful ornaments, and barbers shaved and cut and styled people's hair. Despite how wonderful everything was in the land, there was a deep sadness in the palace. Sounds familiar? For though the king had three wives, he had no children. Dashrath realized that he would have to ask the gods and the sages for help in this matter. He called a council of learned men and he asked them if they knew how he could have sons who would continue his line and rule his kingdom wisely and well, as he had done. The learned men talked among themselves and consulted other learned men. And then they told Dashrath that deep in the forests of his kingdom lived a young ascetic named Rishya Shringa, the sage with the horn. This young man had never lived in human company and had the power to bring rain to thirsty lands. He also had the power to produce sons for childless kings on account of his truly terrifying aesthetic presence. Dashrath sent for the sage with the horn and asked him to perform the special ritual which would produce male heirs for his kingdom. Rishya did as the king asked, and a grand ceremony was performed around a sacred fire with the king and his queens in attendance. As the ritual was coming to an end, an enormous creature, red in color and dressed in crimson garments, arose from the flames. He held a bowl in his hands and presented it to King Dashrath. In a voice that roared and crackled like the fire itself, he told Dashrath, distribute what was in that bowl among his queens. Dashrath bowed his head and joined his palms in gratitude and respect as he accepted the gift from the fiery beam. And then he shared the sweet, milky substance that was inside the bowl among his wives, Kaushalya, Sumitra, and Kaikeyi. Soon the sadness in the palace turned to rejoice. All three queens were pregnant under bright stars that promised fame and good fortune. Kaushalya was the first to give birth. Her son Ram was born with a face like the moon and marked with all the lucky signs that confirmed that he would grow up to be a great king. Soon after that, Kaikeyi gave birth to Bharat, and then Sumitra gave birth to twins, Lakshman and Shatrugna. Banners and buntings flew from the tops of Ayodhya's white buildings as the people celebrated the birth of their princes. The streets were strewn with flowers as the citizens clapped and sang and danced and shared food and drank with each other, turning the city into a great big happy party. Dashrath wept tears of joy as he gazed lovingly at his sons and he thanked the gods for their attention to prayers. Distributed gifts among all his people, cows and clothes and jewels and food and toys for all the children. With the birth of the boys, Ayodhya's future was finally secure, was it? Look, there's this photo of fiery thing coming out and giving the bowl to Dashrath and the three queens. Thinking, that's not how you were born. The princess grew up together, laughing and tumbling and playing in the castle. Ram, the eldest, was always the leader. He was easily the best at everything. His arrows flew straighter, he leaped higher and ran faster. He learned the sacred text before anyone else did. And when they discussed the complex arts of kingship, Ram was just and gentle, wise and practical. Everyone knew that he would be the next king, not only because he was the most suited for the job, but also because Dashrath loved him the best. The three queens watched over their sons with equal delight and pleasure, sharing the joys and cares of motherhood as the boys, with scraped knees and dirt streaked faces, grew into handsome young men who wielded their bows and arrows with as much ease as they displayed when they debated law and politics with their teachers. One day, things are changing. One day, when all was quiet and calm, the great sage Vishwamitra arrived at the gates of Dashrath's palace. Vishwamitra was well known and greatly respected, but he was also feared because everyone knew he would never take no for an answer, not even from the gods. The king rose to meet him and washed his feet with blessed water and gave him the best seat in the court. What can I do for you, great sage? The king said the king humbly. It is my duty to fulfill any wish that you might have. Good, replied the sage. Let me get straight to point. I have come here to take Ram with me to fight the vicious Yakshini Tataka. She has been interrupting my rituals along with her wretched sons. I cannot curse them, for if I display anger by losing my temper, all that I have gained through my austerities will be lost. Prepare Ram to leave with me immediately. But, stammered the king, who was very agitated. Ram is still a boy. He has not been tested in the arts of combat. Tataka has magical power. She can fly through the air and tunnel through the earth and swim through water. She can even make herself invisible. You cannot expect my young son to take her on. Very well, said Vishwamitra as he rose to go. I thought nothing I asked for would be refused in the court of great Dashrath. I was wrong. You are like every other king after all. Very well. Dashrath was even more upset. Please, sir, he begged. Please, sir. Let me come with you. I will kill Tataka. I will send my 8 division army with you. They are mighty fighting force and have never been defeated. Please don't take Ram. I want Ram for this task. No one and nothing else will do, said Vishwamitra firmly. Ram stepped forward and said calmly, let me go, father. I will help the sage. I am ready to fight. And I will take Lakshman with me. Lakshman is like eating his gulab jamun and like, huh? Take Lakshman with me. I am ready to fight. I will take Lakshman with me. And he turned to the sage and said, I shall follow wherever you lead. I will take Lakshman with me. A small smile broke through Vishwamitra's stern expression when he heard Ram's determined words. He left the grand palace with Ram and Lakshman, who were carrying their gold tipped bows and with their quivers full of arrows flecked with the feathers of the sky soaring eagles. They left the bustling city and traveled through the deep, quiet forest that surrounded it until they came to a vast wasteland. It was dotted with scrubby trees and dried up ponds. Birds of prey wheeled in the air and a harsh, hot wind blew around them. Soon they reached an outcrop of rock that cast a dark and brooding shadow over the earth. Come, said the sage. This is where I am performing a ritual that will make me even more powerful than I am. As soon as I begin, Tataka will arrive with her sons, Subahu and Maricha. They will harass me and disturb my concentration. You must kill all three of them. Be alert, for they are mighty and brave. And they can fight in the sky as well as on earth. You have my blessings. As the sage settled down to his practice, great whirlwind arose, scattering dust into the young prince's eyes and stinging their face. Lakshman, it's her! Yelled Ram as he strung his bow. As the wind howled around them, they could see the gigantic Tataka in its midst, sharp fanged, copper haired, arms and legs waving. She flew towards them. Her sons followed behind her, equally large and equally frightening. A single blow from Ram sent Subahu and Maricha reeling backwards so far and so fast that they landed with a splash in the ocean, which was thousands of miles away. Pretty good for a young kid. Enraged, Tataka charged towards Ram. Kill her! Shouted the sage. Lakshman prepared to lose an arrow that would annihilate the Yakshini, but Ram was quicker and sent forth a shower of arrows that pinned Tataka to the ground. I can't kill her, Lakshman, he said as he slung his bow over this woman. She is a woman. Oh, sorry. Oh, as he slung his bow over his shoulder. She is a woman, but I have destroyed her power to move. Lakshman is like, okay, let me know if you want me to come. Vishwamitra was pleased with the courage and skills that the boys had shown. So chivalrous. Very nice. Right now, he said as he patted their backs. Rest now. Rest now. Children, rest now. Tomorrow, you shall receive your reward. I will teach you the secrets of the most powerful weapons in the world. They will make you invincible in battle. Ah, look at this. He's attacking Ram and Lakshman. You see, I like how There are two moons or suns behind the guys and all red and dangerous looking things. Very interesting. The next morning, Vishwamitra began his lessons. He taught the princes how to concentrate, how to center their energies, and how to focus their minds to remain calm and when they were under attack. As Ram and Lakshman improved by the day, he showed them how to control their breathing. Finally, he whispered the great secrets to them, magic words that would power and direct the weapons of the gods. He gave Ram mantras for the Vayavya, the Agniya, and the Varuniya, especially preparing him to fight and defeat the deadliest enemies. Then the sage turned the boys away from Ayodhya and led them in an easterly direction. I want to take you to Mithila, where King Janaka rules, he said mysteriously. He is a king, but he has the mind and wisdom of a sage. His kingdom, Vidya, is not as rich as your kingdom of Kosla, and his city doesn't have the wealth and splendor of Ayodhya. It is a simple place, and its people live off the land. I have heard that King Janaka himself used to plough fields. His daughters have reached the age when they should be married, and the king has set a task for the man who wishes to marry the eldest, Sita. Lakshman understood what the sage was hinting at, and he winked at Ram and looked away with a smile. Vishwamitra entered Mithila, the two princes behind him, and made straight for the royal enclosure. Although it was small and quite rustic, it was brightly decorated with flowers and leaves and other produce from the fields, and patterns were drawn with rice flour on the ground. Music wafted through the air. They could hear the gentle notes of a flute and strains of a stringed instrument. Perhaps people were singing as well. This rose and fell as they drew closer to the central square. The square was crowded, and though Ram thought he recognized the king, a distinguished looking man with long beard, there was no sign of any princesses. In the middle of the square was a massive bow, the largest that Ram had ever seen. It was polished a silvery sheen like the full moon. Its tips were as bright as the sun, and its string, which hung loosely, seemed to hum with energy. It had been dragged into the square by 500 men pulling an iron cart with 8 wheels. Janaka approached the sage and touched his feet, welcoming the princess with a warm smile. What can I do for you, my lord? He asked. This is Prince Ram of Ayodhya, son of mighty monarch Dashrath, and this is his brother Lakshman. I want Ram to win the hand of your daughter Sita by lifting the bow, said Vishwamitra. Janaka turned his gaze to the young man who stood tall and proud, a few steps behind the sage. You're welcome to try, Prince Ram. This is Shiva's bow. Shiva's bow. It has been worshipped by my family for generations. No one has been able to lift it, let alone string it. I should also tell you that my daughter Sita is no ordinary woman. She was given to me by the earth herself when I was plowing a field many years ago. Whoever wins her hand must treat her exceptionally well because she is special. Will you promise to do that? I promise to do that, said Ram simply, looking the king in the eye. Without any fuss, Ram walked over to the bow. He closed his eyes, made his mind as still and steady as the earth from which Sita was born. He placed his hands firmly on the bridge of the bow. In a trice, he had lifted the bow and, with a movement as quick as lightning, strung it as well. Before anyone could move, there was a sound like a thunderclap. Ram had snapped the great bow into two pieces. Oops, that is Shiva's bow. Shiva's personal bow. Hmm. Anyway, well, Ram is Vishnu's avatar, so maybe they're cool with it. Wow, where were they? Hmm. The people of Mithila shouted and stamped their feet in celebration. Ram glanced up at the gallery and was sure that he saw a sweet, bright face vanish quickly behind the reed curtain. He smiled to himself and turned to honor the king. Janaka was delighted by Ram's extraordinary feat and understood immediately that the man who was going to marry his daughter was as special as she was. Come, my son, he said, putting his arm around Ram's shoulder. Let us invite your father and his queens and his entire court to the wedding of all my four daughters with all of his four sons. You have won Sita for yourself, but I bestow her three younger sisters in marriage to your noble brothers. This happy day will be remembered in Mithila forever. So Lakshman is like, I am getting married. Lakshman is like what? The multiple weddings lit up Mithila for days and nights. But finally, it was time for the young princes to leave their home and go with their husbands to Ayodhya, a city very different and very far away from their own. Well, let's take a break here and catch up on part two of many, many parts. Right? Anyway, just wanted to say, super proud of who you are, and I'll always be there for you.